Hi, this is Argonax, and we talk about things that don't matter. What game will Valve make next? Cue the music. We actually have two potential answers, Deadlock and Half-Life 3, but those are a tad too obvious. Deadlock is getting slow but steady development as time goes on, and Half-Life 3 has had so much leaks and rumors about it that it's all but confirmed. Probably, maybe, I'm not losing it. So we can expect one or maybe both of these games to fully release within the next year or two, maybe. Again, 100% trust me bro, I'm a valid source on this, I'm not losing it, swear to God. So that begs the question, other than these two games, what is the likelihood of another new Valve game? Or at least which game or game franchise other than these two has the best chance at getting a sequel? After all, Valve has a lot of game franchises, and a lot of these, not just Half-Life, are legends in the gaming world in their own right. And people want sequels to these games just as much as the next guy. Or maybe a brand new game franchise and universe altogether, who's to say? So, just a fair warning, I know that this video is gonna have a lot of speculation on my part. After all, I'm trying to guess at which Valve game is gonna come out after a Half-Life 3, assuming Half-Life 3 is even gonna be their next game. This is basically me doing like 2 layers of speculation. That's like conspiracy theory squared or something. But I think we can make some educated guesses as to which Valve game has the best chance at coming next. So join me, Internet Wanderer, as we try to find out which of these games we can look forward to in the future from Valve. And maybe, just maybe, we can expect one of these games to come out within our lifetimes, assuming Gaben actually decides to get off his ass and actually make a game. Rich-ass, lazy-looking motherfucker.
I said push their racks, not pause for snacks.
Hello and welcome, Internet Wanderer. My name is Argonax. I make video reviews, essays, commentaries, and shorts. I hope you enjoy my content enough to do the YouTube things, such as liking and subscribing. And special thanks to all the channel members, to who I am extremely grateful for their support. Their contributions mean the world to me, and it helps keep the channel going. But enough of that, let's get back to the topic at hand. Now, before I go into detail about all of these games, I want to help classify them in order to make this video a little bit more digestible. So of all of the games that I'm going to be discussing today, I will classify them under 4 different categories. And those are games that are excluded, games that are unlikely, games that are possible, and games that are most likely. And I will be talking about them in that order. But before I get into that, you may be asking, why am I even talking about these potential Valve games? Well, you see, Valve likes to work on many projects at any given time. It's safe to assume that most of the games, or if not all of the games that I will be talking about in this video, Valve has probably given some thought, or maybe even done some work on in the past at some point. Valve is the type of company to pick up a project, work on it for any amount of time, be it a single afternoon, or they could have worked on a project for years only to drop it just because they thought it wasn't worth the time, or they just lost interest. Valve are weird, after all. And honestly, it's just fun to hypothesize about future titles. After all, since Valve games are just so few and far between these days. I mean, hell, the final boss for Valve is the number 3.
More than 2 people and less than 4.
So are you getting a lot of death threats over the non-reveal of Half-Life 3 yet?
I think everybody hopes that we do good work in the future.
So, I am making this list and video as somewhat of a wish list of what to expect from Valve in the future. The far future, maybe, but the future nonetheless. So let's talk about that first category, the games that are excluded. And those games specifically are Deadlock, Half-Life 3, Counter-Strike 2, and Dota 2. All of these games will be excluded, each for a different reason. Deadlock is definitely going to be Valve's next game, or at least their next major multiplayer competitive game. As stated before, it is still very unfinished, but it is gradually getting more content, updates, and polishing as time goes on. The Deadlock team seems to be very driven and continuously keeps the community updated as to what their development goals and plans are. It's actually rather refreshing to have open communication between the players and Valve developers. I wonder what that feels like. People don't really know when Deadlock is going to get its full release. Most estimates like to place it around maybe 2 years away from a full release. So if nothing else, Deadlock is almost definitely going to be one of the next Valve games coming rather soon. And as thus, it will be excluded from this list. Technically speaking, you can go play it now if you wanted to, assuming you have the invite, that is. But let's be real, you watch the Argonax channel, you're a Valve fanboy, you probably have access to Deadlock. Unless you don't, in which case, The next one, Half-Life 3. Now again, this Half-Life 3 is not confirmed. Half-Life 3 has never been confirmed. It has been like this for almost 15 years, if not more, 17 years more like. But as I have stated in many other videos before, the news, rumors, and leaks about Half-Life 3 have never been more frequent and more prevalent than they have been in the last couple of months. 2024 alone had so much news and content that would shine a light as to when we can expect a Half-Life 3. In other words, never has there been a more appropriate time for Half-Life 3 to finally make its grand announcement, and all the signs point towards an inevitable release sometime soon. If only there were videos talking about how Half-Life 3 is coming. And even disregarding all of that, it's kinda also obvious that Half-Life 3 is going to be one of Valve's biggest games coming soon. It's a little too expected, and thus it is also going to be excluded from this list. And the last two is Counter-Strike 2 and Dota 2, and these two kinda have the same reason as to why they're being excluded. Dota 2 is still getting a decent amount of content updates and still has a massive community player base. Dota is also the type of game that doesn't really need a sequel anyway. The only reason we have a Dota 2 is because Dota 1 wasn't even a real game. It was a mod of Warcraft 3. So with Dota 2 still getting a good amount of updates, I don't see any reason for Valve to make a Dota 3. If ever. I highly doubt they're ever going to make one in the future. And with Counter-Strike 2, it is literally Valve's newest game, technically, even though it's a glorified Source 2 port of Counter-Strike Global Offensive, but hey, that's neither here nor there. There's still a lot of stuff missing from it, and Valve is also putting a lot of work to make sure that Counter-Strike 2 is up to feature parity with Counter-Strike Global Offensive, because as it stands right now, it currently isn't. Where is Danger Zone, Valve? I still want it for Counter-Strike 2. So in other words, Counter-Strike 2 just came out, and the likelihood of a new Counter-Strike game happening anytime soon is probably very, very low, next to zero, I would say. Now on to the unlikely category. These are the games that I think, for one reason or another, just lack that same sort of enthusiasm from both Valve and the players to really justify getting a new game or a new sequel in these franchises. I just think that there isn't enough interest in these different games, or it's just not practical for Valve to just focus their attention on these said titles. And I think games that perfectly encapsulate what I'm talking about here are the Dota spin-offs. For those who are unaware, the popular video game Dota 2 has 3 spin-offs. There's that magic number again. It keeps popping up. Crazy how that keeps happening, huh? Those 3 spin-offs are Artifact, Dota Underlords, and the Netflix TV show Dota's Dragon's Blood. And all 3 of these either failed spectacularly or just failed to reach expectations. Artifact is probably Valve's highest profile failure ever. Dota Underlords was severely disappointing despite the fact that I think it had a lot of potential and I personally enjoy it. I also made an 1.5 hour long video talking about it, but hey, nobody watched that. And then you also got the TV show, which again is really cool that Valve actually partnered up with Netflix to actually make this TV show. It has a lot of A-list voice actors like Troy Baker, Yuri Lowenthal, and the late Tony Todd. It was also animated by the same studio that did Avatar. It had 3 seasons. I watched all of them. I don't remember much of it, but I definitely watched it. Safe to say that it didn't really leave a lasting impression on me, and that's coming from a huge Dota fanboy, by the way. Just look at my hours, dude. So the likelihood of another Dota spin-off is rather low, I would say. And the same goes for Counter-Strike spin-offs as well. Counter-Strike has had a couple of spin-offs in the past, namely Counter-Strike Condition Zero and Counter-Strike Nexon Zombies. Needless to say, not a lot of people know that these games exist, and most people are just kind of focused on playing whatever the mainline Counter-Strike game is at the time, whether that be Counter-Strike Global Offensive a few years ago or Counter-Strike 2 now. And that also brings up the topic of, with Valve focusing a lot of attention towards Deadlock, while also maintaining full support of Counter-Strike 2 and Dota 2, I don't think we can expect another competitive multiplayer from Valve anytime soon. It takes too much time and too much resources to develop, balance, and manage these esports titan juggernauts. So Valve making a fourth competitive multiplayer game, I don't think is feasible. They could make another new multiplayer game maybe sometime in the future, but will they make it with the intention of becoming the next big esports game? I highly doubt so. So we can scratch off the possibility of a new multiplayer esports game. And finally, along this list of things that are unlikely to happen are ports of Valve's older games, like say Team Fortress 2 and Left 4 Dead, into the Source 2 engine. You see, back in the day in the mid-2000s, Valve developed their legendary video game engine, the Source engine. And when it came out, Valve ported quite a few of their games into this engine. Half-Life, then you got Half-Life Source. Counter-Strike, Counter-Strike Source. Day of Defeat Source. So on and so forth, you get the picture. And while the Source 2 engine seems to be really cool and has showcased a lot of amazing capabilities so far, I don't think that they're going to port their older games into this new engine. More likely than not, we are probably going to get a Left 4 Dead 3 or Team Fortress 3 rather than Team Fortress 2 Source 2 or whatever. So don't expect any ports of Valve's older games into Source 2. Now, the fans might make ports of these games, but that's not Valve. And let's be real, fans are probably going to do that. I'm looking forward towards Black Mesa 2, even though Black Mesa 2 wouldn't really make sense because it wouldn't be called Black Mesa, it would be called like City 17, but whatever. Next up, we have the games that are possible. In other words, games that can happen, although I wouldn't necessarily put them as my top picks as to what we can expect from Valve to put out in the future, but it is, like the name says, it is possible that they can come out sometime, maybe. Okay, a bit of a confession. I admit I have less to go on this category compared to the others, as it's very open-ended. Anything in this category can be literally anything. Valve could go buy out the developers of, I don't know, Caves of Quod and make a sequel, Cock 2 or something like that, and nobody would see that coming. It's Valve after all. They can do whatever the hell they want, for better and for worse. But if I had to make an educated guess as to what Valve could potentially do that is still within the realms of possibility, I think one thing that they could do, assuming that they make Half-Life 3 and they want to make a game after Half-Life 3, is Valve might want to dip their toes into making a follow-up to one of their lesser-known games and game franchises. This will allow them more freedom to experiment with different types of games and genres. They could try to revive Day of Defeat, Ricochet, Alien Swarm. If you don't know what those games are, I don't blame you. A lot of people who are Valve fans don't even know that these games exist. Valve has a big catalog of games that a lot of people just are not aware of. So if Valve does, and again, this is a lot of ifs here, but if Valve does release Half-Life 3, and if Valve wants to make another game after Half-Life 3, they could choose to make a sequel or follow-up to their lesser-known games. Because, well, why would Valve try to one-up one of the most anticipated games of all time? Plus, I think it would be also a safe move for Valve to try to revive one of their lesser-known game franchises. It can get people talking about Valve bringing up their back catalog of less successful games. I just think it's more interesting if nothing else. There's a lot of potential in these games that I think a lot of modern gamers just haven't really realized. I personally would love to play a brand new Ricochet or Day of Defeat. I know I joke a lot about Ricochet 2, but I'm not joking. Ricochet 2, with proper polishing and brought into the modern day, could be amazing. Another possibility that Valve might do is they might try to do another TV show or movie. Other than Dota, of course. Valve is no stranger to this, by the way. They have given thought about making TV shows and movies in the past. Did you know that the Team Fortress 2 cinematic expiration date was initially supposed to be the pilot episode of a TV show that Valve was supposed to make with Adult Swim? But in typical Valve fashion, they took so damn long to make it that the contract fell through, but Valve decided, screw it, we're just gonna upload it anyway. And apparently that's how we got Expiration Date. So Valve could definitely try to make something new again, maybe. Again, I don't have much to go off on this category. Valve could release, I don't know, the Steam Deck 2 next year. I don't know. Actually, the possibility of Valve making a brand new universe and game franchise is definitely possible. I mean, they just did that with Deadlock. It's a brand new IP. And prior to Deadlock being revealed, it went through several design phases where it went from being a spin-off of the Half-Life universe to a sci-fi setting, and now it has this neon occult supernatural setting. Valve can definitely make a brand new game franchise if they wanted to, and if they do, well, that would be really cool. But again, I don't have much to go off on this category. I'm just spitballing ideas. And finally, the category that I really wanted to talk about, the games that are most likely. And those 3 games are Team Fortress 3, Portal 3, and Left 4 Dead 3. Now, these are the 3 most likely, in my opinion, that could get a sequel after Valve makes Deadlock and Half-Life 3. Now, I know that these 3 have that magical number attached to them, that dreaded number that Valve just can't seem to make a game out of. So why do I think that these 3 games are the most likely? Well, let's cover them each one by one. Team Fortress 2 will have its 20-year anniversary in 2027. Lately, Team Fortress 2 has gotten quite a bit of love and attention from Valve. They were able to quash the bot invasion that has been plaguing the game for years, and they finally delivered the long-awaited finale to the comic series that Valve had seemingly forgotten about for almost 8 years. But they finally finished the comic series. And now, in a couple of years, Team Fortress 2 will officially be 20 years old. And just like they did with Half-Life 1 and 2 when they celebrated its 25th and 20th anniversary respectively, they might do the same thing for Team Fortress 2. So the game will probably get a big update, documentary maybe, a patch to fix some bugs or something. In other words, just celebrate the fact that the game is now 20 years old. And maybe they can do some sort of announcement during this celebration, maybe for a new game or sequel, perhaps? Because if there ever was going to be a time to announce a new Team Fortress game, the 20-year anniversary would be ideal. After all, class-based shooters and team-based shooters seem to be very popular nowadays. It's not like Team Fortress would be stepping into a genre space that isn't contested, but I'm confident that Team Fortress has enough legacy and reputation that could mean that if Valve decided to make a new game, it can definitely hold its own in a highly competitive market. So, between these 3 games, I would actually rank Team Fortress 3 in the middle, most likely, at least in my opinion. I'll justify all of these later. Next up, we have Portal 3. Now, the Portal franchise seemingly has been forgotten by Valve, but that's not necessarily true, because back in the pre-development phase of Half-Life Alyx, way before Valve even decided that this VR game was gonna be a Half-Life game, initially they wanted their flagship VR game to be a Portal game. They had already made a tech demo for VR in Portal a while back with The Lab, and seemingly they also wanted to make their first full AAA VR game to be a Portal game. But they decided to go against it when they figured out the idea of jumping through the air with portals in VR was going to be a little too vomit-inducing. I mean, hell, there's people out there who play Half-Life Alyx, and keep in mind, Half-Life Alyx, your character can't jump or sprint. Not really. And there are still people who get motion sick. So yeah, playing Portal in VR, yeah, not good for those who like to keep their food on the inside of their stomachs. They decided to go with Half-Life Alyx instead. But there definitely was some attention directed towards Portal. And even more recently, with another tech demo, wow, Valve really likes using the Portal franchise as tech demos, the Aperture desk job was shown as a tech demo and hardware demo for the Steam Deck. I also know that rather recently Valve and I guess Valve fans were trying to push for an official Lego set for Portal. I'm not too informed about all this, but Valve definitely knows that Portal has some big appeal. After all, Portal 2 was Valve's last single-player game that they had made prior to Half-Life Alyx, and Portal is very beloved, easily one of Valve's most treasured and funniest game franchises out there. But in my opinion, if I had to rate Portal amongst these 3, I would actually put Portal 3 as the least likely to be made. Not to say that it's not impossible, but if Valve really does make a Half-Life 3, would Valve want to follow up a Half-Life 3 with another single-player game like Portal 3? I would say no. But then again, Valve doesn't necessarily need to make games to make money. They're making these games just because they want to, so it's still very likely and possible. And who says that Portal 3 has to be single-player focused? After all, the co-op aspect of Portal 2 was a huge selling point for a lot of people, so maybe Portal 3 could be completely focused around co-op. It's possible, but that's a lot of ifs. And if I'm just going off the fact that Portal 3 could be a single-player focused game, just like Portal 1 and 2 was before it, I would rank it the lowest in terms of the possibility of it getting a new game, at least compared to Team Fortress and Left 4 Dead. Not to say that it's not impossible, it's still very likely that we'll get a Portal 3 at some point, but I'm leaning towards these other games getting sequels before Portal does. And finally, the game that I think has the biggest chance of getting a sequel, Left 4 Dead 3. Now, the history of Left 4 Dead 3 goes back a long time, almost a decade ago. I remember there were leaks showing off images of the potential of the Source 2 engine. I think it was a level from Left 4 Dead 2 that was recreated in the Source 2 engine, and this was almost 10 years ago. Left 4 Dead is one of those franchises that hasn't really gotten any meaningful spotlight, at least not directly from the gaming world and from Valve as well. But Left 4 Dead is one of their most beloved franchises. As the Left 4 Dead series basically jump-started an entire new subgenre of co-op games. And it's actually for that reason that I think Left 4 Dead has probably a better chance than Team Fortress and Portal. Because the Left 4 Dead franchise is the perfect blend of being a serious multiplayer game, but not needing to be treated like an esport. Left 4 Dead can be played casually with friends, or it can be played solo, and people can play it seriously if they want to. I know people definitely made tournaments out of Left 4 Dead. But despite that, the pressure for Valve to make a new Left 4 Dead game into this perfectly balanced video game isn't really there. They don't need to make it some hyper-optimized, super well-balanced, super tight-crafted game. They don't. And this is more of an opinion, but I just feel that people just want a good co-op shooter again. There have been so many games in the last, decade and a half that has tried to capture the glory that Left 4 Dead and Left 4 Dead 2 was able to achieve back in 2009. And so many games have either failed or just did well enough but never reached the same height that Left 4 Dead did. I'm not saying that all of these games were bad. Of course not. There were some that were just rather disappointing. Of course there were standouts as well. I'm looking at you, Deep Rock Galactic, but those are few and far between. And people still want a true successor to the Left 4 Dead games. And what else can be a better successor than a true sequel, Left 4 Dead 3? It is for this reason that I think Left 4 Dead 3 is the most likely game that Valve will make next after Half-Life 3. But what do you think, Internet Wanderer? Do you agree with my takes in this video? Do you think Left 4 Dead 3 is the most likely Valve game to be made next? Or do you think Portal or Team Fortress has a better shot at getting a third game? Comment your thoughts down below. Thanks for watching, Internet Wanderer. Do the YouTube things.